Welcome to the Long Beach Post Daily Live Chat. My name is Alina Mashka. I'm a reporter for the Long Beach Business Journal, and today I'm joined by Dr. David Godot. Dr. Godot's practice in Bixby Knolls recently launched a virtual support group for small business owners. Dr. Godot, thank you for being here with us today. For starters, could you tell us a little bit about the group? What motivated you to start a support group for small business owners?
Thank you so much for having me. We started the small business support group shortly after the quarantine began, as we were just thinking about the impact that it was having on us and what we were hearing from other business owners in the Bixby Knolls Business Association. And we wanted to find, some way that we could support this community that we've really been a part of for the past year. And so we launched this group on Fridays at 4:30. And it's really a venue for people who are facing the unique struggles of small business owners as we go through this pandemic, to support one another and to share experiences and not feel alone with it.
Mm-hmm. And what's the size of the group normally?
It's varied week by week. Typically, there have been around 6 or 7 people in the group. This week, I think we have 8 RSVP'd so far. And there are still openings. So if more business owners want to join us this week, they're welcome to.
And it's a virtual group, right? So can you talk a little bit about kind of setting that up?
Yeah, so we use the same video format that we do for our online therapy, and we actually do some online group therapy too, which is a secure video system provided by Google. And I actually send out a link. There's a plugin that makes it look really pretty with a tiled version of everybody, so you can see everybody at once. But it's led a little bit differently than a therapy group, but it's definitely facilitated by myself and by one of the therapists in my practice in order to really kind of open the floor and make things comfortable and to build community.
And yeah, you mentioned the difference with group therapy. Could you talk a little bit about what that difference between a support group and group therapy is?
For sure. Yeah. So group therapy is like psychotherapy. You're trying to face up to and resolve inner problems. And with a support group, typically you're facing external problems that can't be fixed. Here we are all taking part in this pandemic and this quarantine. And there's nothing we can do about it, but hopefully we can make it a little easier on ourselves. And so the support group, gives space for us to just share experiences and not feel like we're the only one going through the unique struggle of a small business owner, which is, being completely in charge of everything and having people dependent on you and not having anybody to complain to and being very uncertain about the future. And also to help people brainstorm solutions to their everyday problems and to focus on self-care, things that can very easily fall by the wayside when you're working 60 hours a week, staring at a computer screen, trying to make sure that everything stays afloat.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like you also have some personal experience. You're a small business owner. How has the current situation affected your practice?
It's been very interesting, and it's moved very quickly. The first couple of weeks that the quarantine was beginning, I definitely lost quite a bit of sleep, like most small business owners did, because I had no idea how this was going to affect our practice. And we don't work with a lot of insurance, and so a lot of our clients are struggling financially, and we've not been sure how it's going to affect the people that we work with and help. As things have gone on, our situation has stabilized. We moved our whole practice online, so we're still available and doing individual therapy and counseling, and actually even marriage and family therapy online, which is going very well. And I have some experience doing that in the past, in hospital and residential treatment settings. And so I felt pretty confident that I could get my team up to speed and really able to use this format in the best way possible. And I've been really happy with the results. And I've been checking in with our patients from time to time to make sure that everybody is feeling comfortable about the new format and, handling the transition and just the changes in lifestyle. Okay.
Yeah, and within the group, what are some of the biggest concerns that participants have voiced so far in the past few weeks?
Well, there's definitely been a lot of talk about the same types of changes that we've made. Changing your business model very rapidly has been a common theme. We talk to restaurant owners who have become bodegas, and travel agents who are developing online packages, and therapists of various types who are moving online and developing different offerings, and artists who are offering childcare, and lots of different movement and creativity around how to make the business work. And it's really encouraging and incredible to see the very bright and innovative minds, who are just jumping right on the problem and getting out ahead of it and making things work. So it makes me really feel good about being a part of the community that I'm a part of. Other things that come up are managing families. The kids are all out of school, and parents have become, de facto homeschool teachers and principals, and are sending each other, for disciplinary action. And also, while all this is going on, it's especially difficult to carve out time for yourself.
Mhm.
And so we've talked some about what does that look like? What does everybody really know they need to be doing more of, that, it's just tough to prioritize. And hearing other people talk about those things and what everybody's planning, I think really plays an instrumental role in recentering on being the healthiest and most capable caregivers that we can be.
Now, this situation has impacted everyone, no doubt about that. Are there any industries that are experiencing especially high amount of psychological stress from what you've been observing in your group?
You know, I think one of the saddest and scariest cases is with the restaurant industry. And we have such a bright and vibrant and wonderful restaurant industry in Long Beach, and they're really uncertain of whether they're going to be able to survive. The arts are really heavily affected. Performances are all shut down. Touring musicians and comics are not able to engage in any of their art forms. And so, um, there are a lot of, basically, I'd say the industries that are already, operating in an economic um, state of balance, of delicate balance, are really the most heavily hit. Just the same as families, where if you're paycheck to paycheck, this is really scary. Versus if you have a few thousand in the bank and you know that you could maybe coast a month or two, then it's still very unsettling, but less so. It's not an immediate crisis of survival.
Hmm. And how does the support group help business owners kind of work through the unique challenges that they're facing at the moment?
One of the things that we've set out to do with it is, we're all inundated with information about how to navigate these SBA loans, which for the most part still have not been issued, and how to, do all the accounting, and how to work with banks, and all of these practical issues that we all have to figure out. But I mean, we're all kind of obsessively researching them every day anyway. And so we set out with this group to make sure to not focus on those things that we're all paying attention to anyway and are kind of running ourselves ragged dealing with, but instead to focus on the internal life and the internal issues and how you're coping with the stress. Because it can be easy to just not notice how much the stress is affecting you until, if you're like me, you start, developing a cough and thinking, oh man, I've got it. And now I'm going to shut down for a couple of weeks, and who knows what comes after that. So I think that really helping people put the focus on their own well-being is the primary service that I hope our group will provide.
Now, I'm sure that is a task that is difficult for a lot of people to focus on their well being at the time and not get too consumed by the news and all the administrative tasks that come with this current situation. Do you have any advice, or can you tell us how you make that work within your group?
Um, so if I understand your question, I think you're asking if I have any tips for how people can manage some of this stress and be healthier and pay attention to their own well-being, which is a great question. I'm really happy you asked about that. The first one is you can join a group such as the one we're running, where we're talking about this stuff on a weekly basis and just keeping it fresh in your mind. The things that I personally recommend to everyone and use myself, and I feel the difference when I don't, is you got to pay attention to just the regular lifestyle factors that contribute to wellness. You got to eat healthy, even though you're locked up all day. If you're eating more sugar and drinking more alcohol, like most people are, it's going to degrade your sense of physical vitality and your sense of mental energy. And you're not going to wake up feeling as good, and you're not going to sleep as well. And you're going to wonder why, but that's a huge contributor. You have to eat in a healthy way, a balanced way, and to be mindful of things in a way that that maybe is even more so than you normally would when you're not under this kind of stress. Exercise is another huge one. And there's been study after study that show that exercise is a huge contributor to mental health. It's one of the most basic things that I can recommend to literally everyone. Even if you are physically injured or incapacitated, there's something you can do. Find out what exercises apply to you, do them regularly, at least a few times a week. And that will help decrease systemic inflammation. It'll help level your mood, and it'll help you relate to your body better. And your body is kind of where your emotions live. So if you're relating to your body better, you're more aware of how you're feeling. You're more able to respond to your feelings. And I think that's a big one, is just listening to yourself. When you feel bad, don't try to ignore that and push it to the side. Ask yourself, what is this feeling requesting? You know, this is a message from your body. What does my body need from me that results in this feeling? And how could I feel better? You know, not just try and make it go away, but address the feeling. Journaling is a great thing to do. You know, one thing that I have been thinking about a lot, I see a lot of people who are in survival mode right now, and they're just scrambling to survive. And you know, so whether you're in therapy or not in therapy, your focus is going to look a little different. It's on managing the outside world and keeping everything in balance. But for those of us who are fortunate enough to be in a situation where you're not in tremendous financial peril, maybe you're able to continue working, you're bored most of the time and have more time available to you. This is a really good time to focus inward and start to do some of the work on accepting yourself and exploring your feelings that you otherwise might not have time for. And some of the ways to do that is developing a meditation practice, developing a journaling practice, starting in psychotherapy. This is a really good opportunity if you use it right.
Mm-hmm. Now, business owners face the unique challenge that they also have to manage employees and kind of how this situation is impacting them emotionally. Do you have any specific advice for business owners on how to handle that at the moment?
It definitely depends on what kind of state your business is in and what your relationship with your employees is. A lot of businesses, unfortunately, have had to lay off a lot of employees, you know, in part because some of the loans that they were relying on haven't come through. Their business models are changing, and they just aren't, you know, they're thinking about how can I keep the doors open so that I can employ people next year versus how can I keep everybody paid today. So if you're in that position, you know, I would suggest being as transparent and empathic as possible. You know, let people know that you're not doing this because you're an evil person, but because you're trying to make sure they have a job at the end of this. If you're in the position where you're able to preserve positions, but like most of us, probably things are tentative and you're not sure how this is all going to shake out. Again, I think I encourage being candid with the people that you work with, to let them know I'm taking all the steps I can to make sure we remain stable. I can't promise anything. Let's work together on this. And, you can even elicit ideas from your team if you have specific problems that you're trying to solve and are not sure what the right answer is. Use the creativity of the people that you work with, because they are all wanting something to do about this situation, to feel proactive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The group is focused on business owners, but you'd probably be hard-pressed to find someone who's not impacted by the current crisis in some way. You've already mentioned some general advice, but what are some takeaways from the group sessions that you think might be of interest to our audience at large?
Well, let's see. I think that one thing that people have found a lot of value in, that I think is probably not unique to the business community, is people are working extra hard to reestablish and maintain their social connections. And when this all started, we were talking a lot about social distancing. And I like that the focus, of our leadership at the state level has changed to the idea of physical distancing.
Mm-hmm.
Because while we do need to remain physically distant in order to keep everybody safe, we're very social creatures, and you will become Tom Hanks in Castaway and start talking to volleyballs if you don't connect with people and remain engaged with the people that you care about. And I think that's one of the positive things that's come, that I've seen with my family and with my friends and with the people that I talk to in the business group, is people are a little more willing right now to answer the phone, to do a voice chat, to spend time just being connected in a way that, as our culture has become more and more productivity driven and struggling economically, it's something that a lot of us have not paid as much attention to over the past few years as maybe we wish we had.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be a good opportunity to reevaluate: how do I relate to my support system, and how do I relate to myself? Even I find myself in the position of treating myself like I'm some sort of work robot that is just supposed to be able to get everything done and go nonstop. And that inclination is natural, especially with our always on, hyper-connected culture.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're at all privileged to be able to take some time to reflect right now, reflect on ways that you treat yourself, that you talk to yourself, and that you afford yourself time to reflect.
Mm-hmm. Now, you specialize in the treatment of anxiety, PTSD, and stress-related medical conditions. How has that training featured into the work you do with the small business owners, the participants of your group?
Stress and anxiety are everywhere. They're two universal conditions. And so everything I do in therapy, and at this point, after working in therapy and psychological assessment for over a decade, basically everything I do, I think, is to some degree informed by that sense of how stress affects us and how we manage stress. And if you watch people respond to the stresses in their life, it's really impressive how resilient people are and how much we deal with. And how much we go through in order to care for ourselves and our families, to build businesses. And so I think that, when I'm thinking about the business owners that I talk with in the group, and I see how they're responding to stress, I'm listening with a therapist's ear and hearing the mechanisms that they're using, the strategies that they're using, that maybe they're not even aware that they're using to manage stress. And everything I do and say just tries to nudge people in a direction of addressing their stress head on, and using coping strategies that are likely to work out in a positive way for them, that are likely to give them more hope and resilience and personal strength. Instead of depleting them. And, some of those strategies that deplete us are, drinking too much, staring at the TV for endless hours, flipping through social media constantly. I don't know about you, but after those things, I feel more tired than I did before. And and it uses energy to do those things, even though we're all just as inclined to distract ourselves. But there are lots of things that we can do that are proactive, that are fulfilling, and that give you more energy than you started out with. And I think that if you pay attention to the way that you're feeling and to your energy levels, you end up arriving at some of those really healthy strategies.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of strategies, thinking of the future, it's kind of hard to assess when we will return to a semblance of normalcy. But from a psychological standpoint, what does the business community have to prepare for moving forward?
Personally, I'm preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. There's, as I pay attention to the epidemiology of what's happening here and in other countries, what the CDC is telling us, it sounds like there will be at least one more wave of this virus, probably in the wintertime. And the, director of the CDC says it could be worse than the first one. And I really don't know how state and federal leadership are going to respond to the ebbs and flows of this condition, and how the economic impacts are going to spread out across all of our industries. And so, psychologically, I try and get myself in a position where I can accept the worst possible outcome without being overwhelmed by it, and where I can maintain hope without absolutely needing the best outcome.
And from a business perspective or a business standpoint, what do you think this time can teach us about the psychology of small businesses?
Well, one thing it's taught me is that debt management is even more critical for the small business owner than it is for the individual. And by that I mean, maintaining working capital is something that in mid to larger size companies is taken for granted. They've got accountants working for them and CFOs. But when you're working in a small business, and it may be just you and your spouse, maybe a small group of leaders, it can be very difficult to plan ahead for an event like this, and to arrange things in such a way that you have the working capital to continue to make payroll, to continue to sustain your supply system. And I think that that's one of the lessons we're all walking away from this with, is that we need to be paying attention to how much runway we have, and how we rely on the people that we work with, and how we can support them.
Now you have an expertise in trauma. How do you think this kind of collective trauma that we're experiencing right now is going to affect the business community in the long run?
That's a huge question. I think you're right. I think this is a traumatic situation, and we don't know yet how severe the trauma is going to be. When you're looking at psychological trauma, one of the principles is, when you're actually going through the trauma, you do whatever you can to sustain and compartmentalize, and, mentally manage the stress and take care of yourself physically. It's all about just getting through the incident. After this is all done, we're going to have to analyze and to deal with our lost sense of trust in the economy and the world, and our lost sense of security in businesses that may have been running along smoothly for years, that were suddenly completely disrupted, and with no sign of when they'll be able to return to normalcy. And so the nature of trauma is that impact on a person's sense of security. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how businesses respond. I think you're going to see a reduced willingness to take risks. There may be, as much as there's a dramatic increase in creativity in this time, and everybody trying to arrange their businesses for success, one thing that I would be afraid of is that people will feel pretty gun shy in the coming years until it's very clear that not only this virus is addressed, but that we have an infrastructure for addressing this type of occasion in our society and in our economy. Because without that, where are our safety nets? How can we know for sure that we're going to be able to provide for our families? And that's something that I think is a systemic problem within our entire society right now, that not only business owners but employees are facing as well, with many people being laid off and record numbers applying for unemployment, and even a record number of small business owners applying for unemployment as well.
Dr. Godot, I want to thank you for coming in today. I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about anything else that maybe I didn't specifically ask you about. Is there anything that we didn't talk about yet?
This has been a pretty great and far-reaching conversation. Thank you so much for having me. I will just, if it's okay, give a quick shout out to my team at Psych Lab, who I'm really proud of how well they're handling the ups and downs of this situation. We have some really great therapists working here, and if anybody listening needs somebody to talk to, please pop by our website, psychlab.us, and give us a call. We'll be happy to talk with you, whether you are ready to schedule an appointment or not.
Dr. Godot, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.